Hello, dear listeners. Welcome to today's episode on the English Globe. We are very happy that you are here with us, ready to learn and explore something truly fascinating. Today's journey will take us into the world of international trade and global economics. We will be asking a simple but powerful question. Why is China called the world's factory? You have probably seen labels like Made in China on clothes, toys, electronics, and almost every item around you. But how did this actually happen?
Thank you, Adam, and hello to all our listeners. It is wonderful to have you join us today. This topic is important because understanding China's role in global production helps us understand globalization itself. When we say globalization, we mean how countries are connected by trade, technology, and culture. China plays a very big role in this system. By learning about it, you are not only improving your English, but also learning about how the modern world works.
That is right, Julia. And before we move deeper into the topic, we want to ask something simple from you, dear listeners. If you enjoy learning with us, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the English Globe, and click on the notification bell so you don't miss any future episodes. Also, we would love to hear from you. What do you think about today's topic? Why do you think so many products are made in China? Please share your opinions in the comments below.
Yes, your thoughts are very important to us. By sharing your ideas, you also practice writing in English, which is another way to improve your skills. So don't be shy. Let us know what comes to your mind. Now, let us move back to our subject. When we call China the world's factory, we are talking about a huge transformation that has taken place over the last 40 years. It is a story about history, government policies, people, and technology. It is a story about how a country became central to the global economy.
In this podcast, we will take you step by step through that story. First, we will look at the historical background. We will explain what China's economy looked like before it opened up to the world. Then, we will talk about the changes that began in 1978, when Deng Xiaoping introduced the famous open door policy. That moment changed everything, not only for China, but for the entire world. It was the beginning of China's rise as the world's largest manufacturing hub.
After that, we will discuss the role of labor. China has a very large population, and for many years it provided the world with low-cost labor. This was one of the main reasons why so many companies moved their factories to China. But it was not only about cheap labor. China also built modern infrastructure, roads, ports, airports, and railways that made it easy for companies to produce and ship goods. This combination of factors gave China a big advantage.
We will also explore how foreign investment played a key role. Many Western companies, such as those in the United States and Europe, moved their production to China because it was cheaper and faster. Later, Chinese companies themselves began to grow and innovate. Over time, China was no longer only producing cheap goods. It started producing advanced technology, electronics, and even high-speed trains. This is how China moved from being only a low-cost factory to becoming a leader in innovation.
And finally, we will look at the global impact. When China became the world's factory, it changed the way international trade works. Consumers around the world were able to buy cheaper products. At the same time, industries in other countries faced new challenges. This is why China's story is not only about China, it is about the whole world. Understanding this story will give you a better view of globalization, world trade, and economic history.
So, dear listeners, that is what we will be exploring today. Think of this podcast as a map. We will guide you through history, policies, labor, infrastructure, investment, innovation, and global trade. By the end, you will have a clear picture of how China became the world's factory. And of course, while listening, you are also practicing English. That makes this journey double valuable. You are learning about the world and improving your language skills at the same time.
Yes, that is the beauty of combining English learning with global knowledge. So get ready, stay focused, and let us begin this exciting journey together. China's rise as the world's factory is not just an economic story. It is also a lesson in how nations change, adapt, and connect with the rest of the world. Let us dive into it.
Before we talk about China's rise as the world's factory, we need to look at its past. For most of the 20th century, China's economy was very different from the one we see today. It was a closed economy, meaning it did not trade much with the outside world. The majority of people worked in agriculture, farming the land to grow food for their families. Industry existed, but it was small and underdeveloped. Factories were few, and modern technology was rare. China was mainly focused on survival.
That is true, Adam. China at that time was not seen as an industrial power. Instead, it was a country where most people lived in rural villages, far from modern cities. Life was difficult. Many families had little money and very limited access to goods and services. The government followed a centrally planned economy where leaders decided what to produce and how to use resources. This system often led to shortages, low productivity, and very slow growth. China's people worked hard, but the economy did not progress.
When we look at history, we also see that China went through many political and social challenges. After 1949, when the People's Republic of China was founded, the government tried to modernize through large campaigns, such as the Great Leap Forward. But these programs did not succeed. Instead of bringing rapid industrial growth, they caused major problems, including food shortages and widespread poverty. By the 1970s, China was still struggling to provide enough food, clothing, and housing for its people.
Yes, and one of the biggest challenges China faced was isolation. While other countries were developing trade links, China remained mostly closed to the outside world. This meant it had very little access to modern machines, foreign investment, or international markets. Countries like Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan were already beginning to industrialize quickly, but China was left behind. This created a huge gap between China and the rest of the global economy. The country had great potential, but it was not yet realized.
Another important point to understand is population. China had, and still has, the largest population in the world. In the 1960s and 1970s, this meant hundreds of millions of people lived in poverty. There were not enough jobs outside farming, and cities did not have the industries to employ so many workers. With such a large population and limited resources, the government faced enormous pressure. Leaders realized that if they did not change the system, China would not be able to feed, employ, or educate its people.
This is why history is so important to our topic. The challenges China faced before 1978 shaped the decisions it made later. The lack of industry pushed leaders to focus on manufacturing. The closed economy made them realize they needed to open up to the world. The poverty of the population showed them the need for jobs and growth. All of these factors combined to create the foundation for change. Without this difficult background, China's later transformation would not be fully understood.
So, when we call China the world's factory today, we should remember that it did not start from a position of strength. In fact, it started from a position of weakness. It was a poor country, with a mostly agricultural economy, very little industry, and almost no connection to global trade. But sometimes it is exactly these struggles that push a nation to reinvent itself. China's leaders knew that change was necessary, and history had shown them what was not working.
Exactly, Adam. This is why studying history matters. For English learners listening today, think of it this way. Understanding the past helps you understand the present. When we look at China before 1978, we see the reasons behind its choices. We see why it welcomed reforms, why it opened its doors to the world, and why it focused so much on building factories and industries. Without this historical context, the rise of China as the world's factory would seem sudden. But history shows us it was a response to real challenges.
Now that we understand the challenges China faced before 1978, let us turn to the man who changed everything, Deng Xiaoping. Deng became the leader of China after the Cultural Revolution, and he believed that the old system was not working. In 1978, he introduced a series of reforms that would later be known as the open door policy. This policy meant that China would no longer remain closed to the outside world. Instead, it would open its economy to foreign trade, investment, and cooperation.
Yes, Adam. And this decision was revolutionary. For decades, China had avoided contact with the global economy, but Deng realized that without change, the country would remain poor. He famously said, "It doesn't matter whether a cat is black or white, as long as it catches mice." By this he meant that the system did not matter as much as the results. If reforms could improve the lives of the people and strengthen the economy, then they were worth doing, even if they broke with past ideology.
The reforms began with simple but powerful changes. Farmers were allowed to keep and sell some of the crops they grew, instead of giving everything to the state. This increased food production and gave people more motivation to work. Soon after, Deng allowed small businesses to open, something that had not been possible before. These steps may sound small, but they represented a major shift. For the first time, individuals could make a profit from their work, and that created new energy in the economy.
But perhaps the most famous reform was the creation of special economic zones, also known as SEZs. These were special areas in coastal cities like Shenzhen, Guangzhou, Zhuhai, and later in places like Xiamen and Hainan. In these zones, China allowed foreign companies to invest, build factories, and produce goods. Taxes were lower, rules were more flexible, and the government gave strong support to attract business. The idea was to test new policies in these areas before spreading them across the whole country.
Shenzhen is a great example. In 1978, it was a small fishing village with only about 30,000 people, but because it became a special economic zone, it quickly transformed into a global manufacturing center. Today, Shenzhen has over 12 million people and is known as China's Silicon Valley. This incredible transformation shows the power of Deng's policies. By allowing foreign investment and technology to flow into China, the country could leap forward much faster than if it had remained isolated.
Exactly, Adam. These special economic zones became a bridge between China and the rest of the world. Western companies, as well as firms from Japan, South Korea, and Hong Kong, rushed to invest. They wanted to take advantage of China's large labor force and low production costs. At the same time, China gained access to modern machines, management skills, and international markets. It was a win-win situation. Foreign companies reduced their costs, while China gained jobs, technology, and experience in global trade.
Another important part of Deng's reforms was decentralization. Instead of the central government controlling every detail of production, more power was given to local leaders and businesses. This flexibility allowed regions to experiment with new ideas. If something worked in one area, it could be copied elsewhere. This system encouraged competition between regions and motivated them to attract investment. For the first time, economic growth became a clear goal, and leaders were rewarded for making progress.
We should also remember that Deng's reforms were not just about economics, they were also about changing the mindset of the people. For many years, Chinese society had been told that making profit was a bad thing, linked with capitalism. Deng changed this view. He encouraged people to get rich and to see economic success as something positive. His famous phrase, "To get rich is glorious," inspired millions of Chinese citizens to work harder, start businesses, and look for new opportunities.
The results were quick and powerful. In just a few years, China's economy began to grow at rates never seen before. Factories were built, exports increased, and millions of people moved from farms to cities to work in new industries. For the first time, China was connecting to global trade on a large scale. Foreign companies saw China as a land of opportunity, and they brought with them not only money, but also knowledge and innovation. This combination set the foundation for China's rise as the world's factory.
So, to summarize this section, Deng Xiaoping's open-door policy and the creation of special economic zones were the turning points. They mark the beginning of China's transformation from an isolated agriculture-based country into a modern, industrial nation. The reforms attracted foreign companies, created millions of jobs, and changed the lives of countless people. Without Deng's vision and these bold reforms, China's story as the world's factory would never have been possible.
Now that we have looked at Deng Xiaoping's reforms and the creation of special economic zones, we must talk about one of the most important factors behind China's rise: its labor force. China has the largest population in the world, and in the late 1970s and 1980s, this meant hundreds of millions of workers were available for new jobs. Many of them were young, hardworking, and willing to leave rural areas to work in the growing cities. This gave China an enormous advantage.
Yes, Adam. For foreign companies, this was a dream situation. In many Western countries, wages were high, and hiring workers for factories cost a lot of money. But in China, wages were much lower, which meant companies could produce goods at a fraction of the cost. Imagine a company that produces shoes or clothes. By moving its factory to China, it could hire many workers, produce thousands of items quickly, and sell them at lower prices worldwide while still making profit.
This is why, in the 1980s and 1990s, so many companies shifted production to China. Whether it was clothing, toys, electronics, or furniture, China became the place to go. The low cost of labor was the first reason behind this shift, but it was not just about cheap wages. Workers in China were also disciplined, hardworking, and eager to improve their lives. They accepted long hours because they saw factory work as a path to better opportunities compared to farming in villages.
That is a very important point, Adam. Many people think that China's success was only about cheap labor, but it was also about the mindset of the workers. Millions of rural workers migrated to cities in search of jobs. This mass movement created what is known as the migrant worker economy. These workers were often separated from their families, living in factory dormitories. But they were determined to earn money, send support home, and build a better future. Their sacrifice was a key part of China's transformation.
At the same time, the government supported this process by making it easy for factories to hire large numbers of workers. Local governments in cities like Shenzhen, Guangzhou, and Shanghai welcomed migrant workers and provided land and facilities for companies. This combination of cheap and abundant labor with supportive policies meant that China could produce at a scale no other country could match. Companies knew that if they wanted to produce millions of units quickly, China was the best place.
When we compare China to other developing countries at that time, the difference becomes clear. Countries like India, Indonesia, or Vietnam also had large populations and low wages, but they did not have the same level of organization, infrastructure, or government support. In China, the labor supply was not only cheap, but also reliable and massive. For global companies, this reliability was just as important as cost. They could trust that Chinese factories would deliver on time and in the right quantity.
And let us not forget how this labor advantage shaped consumer life around the world. Because products could be made cheaply in China, they could also be sold at lower prices. People in Europe, America, Africa, and other parts of Asia suddenly had access to affordable goods. From basic clothing to electronic gadgets, items that were once expensive became available to ordinary families. In this way, the hard work of Chinese laborers not only transformed their own country, but also changed the daily lives of people across the globe.
That is so true, Adam. But while this labor system brought many benefits, it also raised challenges. Workers often had to endure long hours, low pay, and strict working conditions. Some critics argued that this was unfair, but for many Chinese workers, it was still better than life in the countryside. Over time, as China's economy grew, wages slowly increased and working conditions improved in many industries. But in the beginning, it was really the combination of determination and sacrifice by workers that powered China's growth.
In fact, we can say that China's labor force became the engine of globalization. Without millions of workers sewing clothes, assembling electronics, and building toys, the global economy would have looked very different. While foreign companies provided the investment and technology, it was the hands of ordinary Chinese workers that turned raw materials into finished goods. Their role was central, and it is one of the reasons China earned the title of the world's factory.
So, to sum up this part of the story, China's labor advantage was more than just numbers. It was about a huge population ready to work, a government that supported industrial growth, and a willingness among people to sacrifice for a better future. Combined with foreign investment and new policies, this labor force gave China the strength to become the global center of production. Without this human factor, the reforms and infrastructure we discussed earlier would not have been enough. Labor truly was the heart of China's transformation.
As we continue exploring China's rise as the world's factory, one key element we must discuss is infrastructure. After Deng Xiaoping's reforms, China understood that economic growth required not only policies and labor, but also physical systems to support industry. The government invested heavily in building modern roads, railways, ports, and airports. These developments connected factories to markets and raw materials, making production faster and more efficient than ever before.
Exactly, Adam. And it was not just about connecting cities. Infrastructure also supported urban growth. Small towns grew into industrial hubs almost overnight. Cities like Shenzhen, Dongguan, and Guangzhou expanded rapidly as new factories opened. High-rise apartments, industrial parks, and transportation networks were built to house workers and manage goods. The speed of urbanization was astonishing. Millions of people moved from rural villages to cities, creating a labor force close to factories and ready to support rapid production.
China also focused on building ports capable of handling massive shipments. Ports like Shanghai, Shenzhen, and Ningbo became gateways to the world. Shipping containers could move goods efficiently, reducing costs and delivery times. Railways linked inland factories to coastal ports, while highways connected different regions of the country. This integrated network allowed raw materials to reach factories quickly and finished goods to reach ports for export. Without this infrastructure, China could not have produced on the scale required by global markets.
And let's not forget the factories themselves. The government supported the construction of large industrial parks where multiple companies could operate in one area. These parks had access to electricity, water, and transportation, making production smooth and efficient. By concentrating factories in specific areas, China created clusters of expertise and innovation. Companies could share resources, learn from each other, and reduce production costs. This strategy increased both productivity and competitiveness.
Another remarkable aspect was the speed at which all of this infrastructure was built. In just a few decades, China transformed its landscape. Cities that were once small villages became modern metropolises with skyscrapers, highways, and industrial zones. The government worked closely with local authorities to plan urban expansion, ensuring that factories, housing, and transport systems were aligned. This coordination was a crucial factor in China's efficiency as a manufacturing powerhouse.
Yes, Adam. Urbanization also had a social impact. Millions of migrant workers moved to cities, providing a steady workforce for factories. New communities emerged around industrial zones, with schools, hospitals, and shops. This created not only a labor supply, but also a support system for workers. urban growth was closely tied to industrial growth, and together they created a network that allowed China to produce goods at a speed and scale unmatched anywhere in the world.
Infrastructure also influenced China's regional development. Coastal provinces benefited first because ports and access to foreign investment were prioritized. Over time, inland provinces also received investment in railways, roads, and industrial parks. This reduced regional inequality and allowed factories to be built closer to raw materials or specific labor pools. By planning infrastructure strategically, China created a national system capable of supporting mass production for both domestic and international markets.
In addition, energy infrastructure played a critical role. Factories required a reliable supply of electricity, and China built power plants, grids, and energy distribution networks to meet this demand. Water supply and waste management systems were also upgraded in industrial zones. By ensuring that basic services supported production, the government minimized disruptions and maintained consistent output. This level of preparation made China a very reliable manufacturing hub for global companies.
All these elements, roads, ports, factories, power, and urban planning, worked together to make China highly efficient. Companies could produce more, ship faster, and reduce costs significantly. Foreign investors recognized this efficiency and were encouraged to move more operations to China. The combination of labor, reforms, and infrastructure created a self-reinforcing system. Factories attracted workers, workers attracted services, and services supported more factories. This cycle fueled China's rapid industrial growth.
Finally, we should highlight how this infrastructure enabled China to connect to global trade. Fast roads, high-speed rail, and deep-water ports allowed goods to reach international markets quickly. Factories could respond to global demand, produce large volumes, and export efficiently. The synergy between urbanization and industrial growth made China not only the world's factory, but also a highly reliable partner for companies around the world. Without such comprehensive infrastructure, China's rise would have been much slower and less impressive.
So, to summarize this section, infrastructure was the backbone of China's industrial growth. Roads, ports, railways, and modern factories transformed the country from a rural, agriculture-based economy into a global manufacturing hub. Urbanization supported labor supply, and industrial clusters enhanced productivity. Together, these elements made China highly efficient, attracting foreign companies and enabling the nation to dominate global trade. Infrastructure, in essence, turned policies and labor into real, tangible output for the world. As we explore the rise of China as the world's factory, it is impossible to ignore the role of foreign investment. Foreign direct investment, or FDI, became a cornerstone of China's rapid industrialization. Beginning in the late 1970s, after Deng Xiaoping's reforms, the government actively encouraged companies from around the world to bring capital, technology, and expertise into China. This was a strategic decision. By attracting foreign investment, China could accelerate its industrial growth, learn modern management techniques, and integrate into the global economy much faster than it could alone.
Exactly, Adam. Foreign companies found China extremely attractive for several reasons. First, there was the labor advantage we discussed earlier. Millions of workers willing to work long hours for relatively low wages. Second, China's new policies allowed foreign firms to establish factories with lower taxes, fewer restrictions, and access to modern infrastructure. Third, the special economic zones created an experimental environment where companies could test production methods and learn how to operate efficiently in China before expanding nationwide. This combination of incentives made China the obvious choice for multinational companies seeking to expand their production abroad.
One of the first industries to take advantage of this was textiles. Western clothing companies, especially from the United States, Europe, and Japan, started moving their production to China in the 1980s. Factories could produce large volumes of garments quickly and at a fraction of the cost compared to domestic production in their home countries. This not only increased the profits of these companies, but also allowed them to sell products at lower prices, making them more competitive in global markets. The influx of foreign investment helped modernize China's textile industry, introducing advanced machinery and production techniques.
Another key industry was electronics. Companies like Philips, Sony, and later Apple began outsourcing components and assembly to China. Initially, Chinese factories focused on simple assembly tasks, but over time, they learned to produce more complex products. Foreign investment was not only about money, it brought knowledge, technology, and management skills. By working alongside multinational companies, Chinese engineers and factory managers gained valuable experience that allowed local firms to grow and eventually compete internationally. Electronics became one of China's most successful export industries.
Toys were also a major sector. Global toy brands like Mattel and Hasbro found China ideal for mass production. The combination of cheap labor, skilled assembly workers, and supportive infrastructure allowed factories to produce millions of units per year. In addition, the Chinese government ensured that industrial zones had the necessary utilities, electricity, water, and transport, so production could continue uninterrupted. Over time, China became the primary global supplier for toys, and this dominance continues today.
As China gained experience and confidence, the scope of foreign investment expanded to more advanced manufacturing. Companies in sectors like automobiles, machinery, and consumer electronics began setting up operations in China. This marked a shift from simple labor-intensive industries to more sophisticated production. Foreign investment not only provided capital, but also introduced modern management systems, quality control procedures, and technical training. Chinese workers and engineers learned these skills quickly, enabling local companies to eventually innovate and develop their own high-tech products.
It is important to note that foreign investment also helped China build a global reputation. When well-known multinational companies set up factories, they signaled to the world that China was a reliable and capable manufacturing hub. This encouraged other investors to follow. Soon, countries from Europe, North America, and Asia were sending capital, equipment, and expertise into China. The influx of foreign investment created a network effect. The more companies came, the more attractive China became for others. This self-reinforcing cycle accelerated China's industrial growth and global integration.
Another factor was supply chain development. Foreign companies often required multiple components for production, and China's industrial zones began attracting suppliers of raw materials, parts, and services. This created an ecosystem where factories, suppliers, and distributors were closely connected. Multinational companies benefited from shorter delivery times, lower costs, and the ability to manage large-scale production efficiently. At the same time, Chinese companies learned how to manage complex supply chains, which prepared them to compete globally in the future.
FDI also encouraged technological advancement. Many multinational companies transferred machinery and technical knowledge to Chinese factories. This allowed China to upgrade its production capabilities rapidly. Factories that initially assembled basic products began producing electronics, machinery, and even precision instruments. Over time, local engineers and managers adapted and improved these technologies, gradually reducing dependence on foreign companies. The combination of foreign investment and technology transfer was a critical step in China's transformation from a low-cost producer to an advanced manufacturing hub.
One more point to consider is the social and economic impact. Foreign investment created millions of jobs, improved wages, and raised the standard of living for many Chinese citizens. Urban areas grew rapidly as workers migrated to factory towns and cities. This created a cycle of growth. More jobs attracted more people, which created a larger domestic market, which in turn attracted more foreign companies. The effects were both economic and cultural, as Chinese society became more exposed to international business practices, consumer goods, and global markets.
In summary, foreign direct investment was more than just money flowing into China. It was knowledge, technology, management skills, and global connections. Western companies shifted production to China because it offered cheap labor, supportive policies, and reliable infrastructure. From textiles, electronics, and toys to advanced manufacturing, foreign investment transformed China into a global production powerhouse. The collaboration between foreign companies and local industries laid the foundation for China's current status as the world's factory.
Yes, Adam. By combining reforms, cheap labor, and foreign investment, China created a unique model that was hard to replicate elsewhere. Companies could produce efficiently, learn new skills, and access global markets, while China gained knowledge, infrastructure, and economic growth. The role of multinational companies was crucial in accelerating China's development. Their investments and expertise helped turn China from a largely isolated agriculture-based country into the global industrial giant we know today.
So, dear listeners, when you see products labeled Made in China, remember that behind each item is a story of strategic policies, abundant labor, and massive foreign investment. This story explains why China became the preferred destination for manufacturing worldwide and highlights the interconnection between local growth and global business. It is a remarkable example of how foreign collaboration can accelerate a nation's transformation and reshape global trade forever. As China's industrial growth accelerated, one of the most remarkable developments was the creation of a complete supply chain system. Unlike many countries that might produce a single component or product, China built an integrated network where raw materials, components, and final goods could move seamlessly from one stage to the next. This meant that factories did not operate in isolation. They were part of a larger ecosystem. Suppliers, logistics providers, and manufacturers all worked together efficiently, creating a system that was extremely productive and reliable.
Exactly, Adam. When we talk about a supply chain, we are referring to all the steps that a product takes from raw materials to the finished item on a store shelf. In China, this system became highly organized. For example, a smartphone might start with metal and plastic components produced in one province, be assembled in another city, and then shipped from a port to the United States or Europe. The proximity of factories, suppliers, and transport networks allowed products to move quickly and costs to stay low. This is something very few countries can match.
Another important aspect is the clustering of industries. Cities and regions often specialize in particular products or components. Shenzhen became famous for electronics, Dongguan for assembly and manufacturing, and Wenzhou for small machinery and tools. This specialization allowed factories to share resources, expertise, and labor. When one company faced a problem, nearby suppliers or manufacturers could provide immediate support. This interconnected network reduced delays and improved efficiency, creating what experts call an industrial ecosystem that is hard to replicate elsewhere.
Yes, Adam. Logistics also played a key role. China invested heavily in highways, high-speed rail, ports, and airports to ensure that goods could move quickly across the country and to the world. Transport costs were minimized, and factories could receive raw materials on time and ship finished products without delays. Combined with the dense network of suppliers, this infrastructure allowed China to respond to global demand almost immediately. Companies knew they could rely on Chinese factories to deliver large orders on schedule, which made China an extremely attractive manufacturing hub.
It is also worth noting that the ecosystem includes not only physical infrastructure, but also human knowledge and experience. Over decades of manufacturing, Chinese engineers, technicians, and managers developed deep expertise in production processes, quality control, and logistics. This knowledge is embedded in the supply chain itself. For foreign companies, moving production to another country often means losing access to this combination of skills, experience, and network efficiency. This makes China uniquely difficult to replace.
Exactly. Other countries might have low labor costs or raw materials, but they rarely have the same level of integration. In places like Vietnam, India, or Indonesia, factories exist, but suppliers and transport networks are often scattered. This creates delays and higher costs. China, on the other hand, has decades of experience coordinating thousands of factories and suppliers into a single efficient system. This interconnectedness is a major reason why China dominates global manufacturing and why companies are reluctant to relocate production elsewhere.
The supply chain system also fosters innovation and flexibility. When companies and factories are close together, they can collaborate to improve designs, test prototypes, and implement changes quickly. If one component needs adjustment, suppliers and manufacturers can adapt almost immediately. This speed is critical for industries like electronics, where product life cycles are short and consumer expectations change rapidly. China's manufacturing ecosystem allows it to operate at a pace that most other countries cannot match.
Another advantage is scale. China can produce enormous volumes of products simultaneously because of its integrated ecosystem. For example, millions of smartphones, shoes, or toys can be manufactured, assembled, and shipped in a matter of weeks. This scale is supported by dense networks of factories, suppliers, and transport systems, creating economies of scale that are difficult for other countries to achieve. Even if another country tried to replicate China's system, it would take decades and significant investment to reach the same level of efficiency.
We should also consider the global impact. Because China's supply chain is so advanced, international companies can rely on it for consistent production and delivery. Disruptions in China can affect markets worldwide because the system is so central to global trade. This illustrates why no single country can easily replace China in global manufacturing. While some companies diversify production, China remains the backbone of many industries, from electronics to textiles to machinery. Its supply chain is simply unmatched.
Finally, we see that China's success is not just about cheap labor or reforms, it is the complete ecosystem that makes the country unique. Factories, suppliers, logistics, and expertise all work together like a well-oiled machine. This integration allows China to produce products faster, cheaper, and more reliably than almost any other country. For students learning English and global economics, it is a clear example of how interconnected systems create competitive advantage on a global scale.
So, in summary, China's supply chain and manufacturing ecosystem are at the heart of its industrial success. From raw materials to final products, factories and suppliers are tightly connected. Infrastructure, human expertise, and regional specialization all contribute to efficiency. This network is one of the main reasons why China became the world's factory and why other countries struggle to match its production capabilities. The ecosystem shows that industrial success is not just about labor or policies, it is about the system as a whole. As we move deeper into China's transformation, one of the most remarkable shifts has been in technology and innovation. In the early stages of economic growth, China was known primarily for producing low-cost, labor-intensive goods. Factories manufactured textiles, toys, shoes, and simple electronics. These products were relatively easy to assemble, and production relied more on workforce size than advanced technology. However, as China's industries matured, leaders recognized that staying competitive in the global market required moving beyond simple imitation to creating original high-tech products.
That's right, Adam. Recognizing this need, the Chinese government began to implement policies aimed at fostering research and development. Universities, research institutes, and high-tech companies received funding to develop new technologies. Incentives were offered to companies investing in R&D, and collaborations with foreign firms were encouraged. By building a strong foundation for innovation, China aimed not only to produce more goods, but to produce smarter, more advanced products capable of competing with global leaders in technology.
Initially, the strategy was to learn from foreign companies and technologies. Chinese engineers and managers studied how multinational firms designed, assembled, and marketed their products. This knowledge allowed Chinese factories to improve quality and efficiency rapidly. While imitation often has a negative connotation, in China's case, it was a calculated strategy to understand global standards, identify gaps, and develop the capacity to innovate. Over time, these efforts laid the groundwork for a more advanced manufacturing sector.
Exactly. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, China was no longer just copying foreign products. It was enhancing them. Companies began investing in their own designs, creating better electronics, more durable machinery, and more efficient production processes. Government support played a major role here. Policies encouraged innovation through tax incentives, subsidies for high-tech firms, and establishment of science parks and technology hubs, particularly in cities like Shenzhen, Beijing, and Shanghai. This focus on R&D signaled a deliberate shift from imitation to innovation.
An example of this evolution can be seen in the electronics industry. Early on, China manufactured basic components for companies like Apple, Sony, and Samsung. Factories assembled products according to foreign designs, with little input on technology or innovation. However, over the years, Chinese companies invested in developing their own technology. Today, companies like Huawei, Xiaoping, and BYD produce advanced smartphones, electric vehicles, and telecommunications equipment that compete globally. These achievements demonstrate China's move from low-cost manufacturing to high-tech innovation.
Yes, Adam, and the role of government policies cannot be overstated. China invested heavily in building world-class universities and research institutions, creating a talent pipeline for innovation. Programs such as the 1,000 Talents Plan attracted skilled researchers and engineers from around the world. Intellectual property laws were strengthened, and collaboration between academia and industry was encouraged. By creating an environment conducive to research and development, China accelerated its technological capabilities at a scale few countries could match.
Another important factor was the integration of digital technologies into manufacturing. China embraced automation, robotics, artificial intelligence, and advanced software to improve productivity and quality. Factories became more efficient and capable of producing complex products at a high scale. The combination of skilled labor, government support, and technological adoption allowed Chinese firms to move up the value chain. No longer were they limited to basic assembly. They began designing, testing, and producing high-tech goods entirely in-house.
We should also note the rise of innovation clusters, similar to Silicon Valley in the United States. Cities like Shenzhen became hubs for technology and entrepreneurship. Startups, large companies, and research centers work together in a dense network, sharing knowledge and driving rapid development. This environment encouraged experimentation and risk-taking, essential components of innovation. Companies that once only assembled products now led the way in designing new electronics, renewable energy technologies, and advanced manufacturing solutions.
The transition from imitation to innovation also changed China's role in global trade. Initially, foreign companies dominated the design and marketing of products, while Chinese factories focused on production. Today, Chinese companies not only manufacture goods, but also innovate in design, research, and global branding. This has shifted global dynamics, making China not just the world's factory, but a leading player in technological development, research, and global markets.
Furthermore, innovation in China is supported by a unique combination of government strategy, private enterprise, and global collaboration. Policies encourage investment in new technologies, while private companies compete and innovate at a rapid pace. Collaborations with international firms provide knowledge transfer, while domestic talent develops proprietary solutions. This approach allows China to adapt quickly to global trends and emerging industries, from 5G telecommunications to electric vehicles, renewable energy, and artificial intelligence.
It's also worth highlighting the importance of scale in China's innovation ecosystem. With access to the largest domestic market in the world, Chinese companies can test and refine products rapidly. Consumer feedback, large-scale pilot projects, and rapid iteration allow businesses to improve designs quickly. This combination of scale, talent, government support, and global collaboration gives China a unique advantage in turning innovative ideas into market-ready products faster than many competitors.
So, dear listeners, the journey from low-cost goods to high-tech products reflects a deliberate, multi-decade strategy. It began with learning and imitation, combined with foreign collaboration, and evolved into independent innovation supported by government policies, research institutions, and entrepreneurial talent. China's transformation demonstrates how a country can move from being a low-cost producer to a global leader in technology, fundamentally changing its economy and its role in the world.
To summarize this section, technology and innovation have been central to China's rise as the world's factory. From producing simple, low-cost items to developing advanced electronics, electric vehicles, and telecommunications products, China leveraged government policies, skilled talent, and global collaboration. By focusing on research and development and creating innovation hubs, the country moved from imitation to original design. Today, China is not only the factory of the world, but also a leader in high-tech innovation. As we approach the final stages of understanding China's transformation, we must consider the global impact of its industrial growth. China's rise as the world's factory has reshaped international trade, economics, and production networks. By producing vast quantities of goods at lower costs than almost any other country, China became an essential partner for companies around the world. This dominance influenced pricing, availability of products, and the very structure of global supply chains, affecting both developed and developing nations.
Exactly, Adam. For Western companies, China became the go-to manufacturing hub. From clothing and toys to electronics and machinery, the majority of products purchased by consumers worldwide were either made in China or contained components from China. This allowed companies to reduce costs, expand markets, and increase profits. Meanwhile, consumers benefited from lower prices and access to a wider variety of goods. The global economy became increasingly dependent on China's manufacturing capacity, making its industrial performance critical to trade stability.
China's rise also had a profound impact on other manufacturing countries. Nations like the United States, Germany, and Japan saw some industries shift production to China to remain competitive. At the same time, countries in Southeast Asia faced both competition and opportunity. While they struggled to match China's scale and efficiency, they became part of regional supply chains, supplying raw materials or components. China's dominance created a complex global web where economies were interconnected through trade, investment, and production networks.
Another important aspect is China's role in global logistics. Its advanced infrastructure, ports, and efficient production systems allowed goods to reach international markets quickly and reliably. This reliability made China an indispensable partner for multinational companies. Even during global crises or fluctuations in demand, companies often relied on Chinese production because of its scale, speed, and ability to adapt. No other single country could match this combination of production capacity, cost efficiency, and logistical integration.
China's trade dominance also affected commodity markets. Large-scale production required massive amounts of raw materials, including metals, plastics, and chemicals. This demand influenced global commodity prices and trade flows. Countries exporting raw materials benefited from the Chinese demand, while others had to adjust their industrial strategies to remain competitive. China's consumption and production patterns became a central factor in shaping the global economy, illustrating how a single nation's industrial policies can have worldwide effects.
Furthermore, China's influence extended beyond economics into strategic global considerations. Countries recognized that reliance on Chinese manufacturing created both opportunities and vulnerabilities. While outsourcing production to China brought lower costs and efficiency, it also meant that geopolitical tensions, trade disputes, or disruptions in China could ripple across the world. Governments and companies increasingly considered China's central role when making economic and strategic decisions, highlighting the significance of its manufacturing dominance.
In addition, China's rise spurred innovation in global supply chain management. Companies had to coordinate complex networks spanning continents, managing production, shipping, and inventory efficiently. Advanced technologies such as automation, real-time tracking, and digital logistics became essential. Chinese factories often led the way in integrating these technologies, creating an ecosystem that further strengthened their global competitiveness. This technological edge added another layer to China's influence on world trade.
China's global impact also transformed consumer behavior. Products that were once expensive became widely accessible, changing lifestyles in Europe, America, Africa, and Asia. The affordability and availability of goods such as smartphones, clothing, electronics, and household items allowed people to enjoy higher living standards. Meanwhile, businesses benefited from predictable, large-scale production that could meet fluctuating global demand. China's efficiency and scale became a model for industrial development worldwide.
It's also important to highlight how China's trade dominance influenced international business strategies. Companies no longer simply manufactured locally. They adopted a global production model. Design and marketing might occur in one country, components sourced from another, and final assembly in China. This global interconnection strengthened China's position as it became the linchpin of international manufacturing networks. The country's influence reached every sector, from electronics and apparel to automotive and machinery.
Moreover, China's role in global trade has policy implications. Governments and international organizations closely monitor Chinese production and exports. Trade agreements, tariffs, and regulatory measures often consider China's central position in manufacturing. Countries understand that any disruption in China's industrial ecosystem could have far-reaching consequences for global markets, highlighting the strategic importance of its factories, supply chains, and industrial capabilities.
Finally, we see that China's global impact is not only economic, but also strategic, social, and technological. Its manufacturing dominance shaped global trade patterns, influenced commodity markets, transformed supply chains, and affected consumer behavior. Multinational companies, governments, and workers worldwide had to adapt to China's central role. The efficiency, scale, and integration of China's industrial ecosystem created a foundation for global interconnectedness that continues to grow and evolve.
So, dear listeners, China's rise as the world's factory is more than a story of economics. It is a story of global transformation. Its manufacturing dominance shaped trade, influenced policies, and changed how people around the world live and work. The development of supply chains, innovation, labor, and infrastructure all contributed to this impact. Understanding China's role in global trade helps us appreciate the complexity and interdependence of today's global economy.
In summary, China's global impact and trade dominance illustrate how a single country's industrial and technological development can reshape the world. From supplying affordable consumer goods to integrating advanced technology into manufacturing, China became indispensable to global commerce. Its factories, supply chains, and innovation ecosystems ensure that the country remains a central player in world trade, influencing economies, companies, and consumers worldwide for decades to come. As we wrap up today's podcast, it's important to reflect on the key lessons from China's rise as the world's factory. From the late 1970s, China transformed its economy through strategic reforms, foreign investment, infrastructure development, and industrial policy. These elements combined to create an efficient, large-scale manufacturing system that powers global trade. What stands out is how coordinated planning, long-term vision, and adaptability allowed China to grow from a largely rural country into a global industrial leader within a few decades.
Absolutely, Adam. For learners, studying China's story offers valuable insights into globalization. We see how local policies can have global consequences, how labor, investment, and innovation interact, and how interconnected the world has become. Global trade is not just about buying and selling goods, it's about networks, relationships, and systems that span countries and continents. Understanding this process helps learners appreciate the complexity of modern economies and the opportunities and challenges that globalization presents.
Another takeaway is the importance of economic history. By studying how China developed its manufacturing capabilities, we understand why global supply chains look the way they do today. We see how decisions about infrastructure, education, technology, and policy have long-term effects. This perspective is not only useful for learners of economics or international relations, but also for anyone trying to understand how countries grow, compete, and collaborate in the modern world.
Exactly. Learners can also reflect on the interplay between imitation and innovation. China's approach shows that studying others, learning from existing knowledge, and then adapting it to local conditions can be a pathway to global leadership. It's a lesson that extends beyond economics to education, personal growth, and professional development. Persistence, learning from experience, and strategic planning can create remarkable results over time.
Finally, studying China's rise reminds us that the world's economic landscape is constantly evolving. What seems unchangeable today may shift tomorrow. By examining historical examples, learners gain a framework for analyzing trends, understanding market dynamics, and anticipating the effects of global decisions. Knowledge of history is a tool for making informed judgments, not just in economics, but in all areas where decisions affect multiple people, societies, and nations.
So, dear listeners, the story of China's transformation into the world's factory is more than a lesson in economics. It teaches us about globalization, innovation, strategy, and long-term thinking. For English learners, it also offers an opportunity to practice understanding complex ideas in a clear and structured way. Observing history helps us make sense of the present and prepares us to engage thoughtfully with the world around us.
To summarize, China's journey demonstrates the power of reforms, infrastructure, investment, technology, and global integration. Learners can understand how these factors interact to create economic success and global influence. By studying economic history and globalization, we gain perspective on why the world functions as it does today and how strategic thinking can shape the future. It's a story full of lessons, both for nations and for individuals striving to understand the modern world.
And with that, we hope today's podcast leaves you with not only knowledge about China and global trade, but also an appreciation for the importance of learning history, analyzing trends, and thinking critically. Remember, understanding the past is essential to navigating today's interconnected world, and these lessons can inspire learners in economics, business, and beyond.
Studying China's rise reminds us that economic history is more than dates and numbers. It's about understanding the forces that shape our world. By learning from the past, we can make sense of globalization, innovation, and trade, preparing ourselves to engage thoughtfully with the challenges and opportunities of today and tomorrow.